Hey guys, it's Khalil,
Hey, it's Chad.
and we are the Marshals of Truth. Starting our whatever episode this is on Peace Be Freedom, we wanted to talk about the like how much the truth is prioritized, as well as how it links with the law, and how much those two things are taken very seriously in American society, and how law is paramount, and how it's inflexible, and how the Constitution is strong enough to hold back against those that want to deny truth. Um, like even the most crazy presidents, they, you know, get support off of the idea that claiming that no one is above the law, that that the law, doesn't see color, hopefully at least now, that the law doesn't see, gender or sexuality, or any sort of divide, or religion, that it's going to see evenly and judge accordingly. You know, that's why even Nixon, once he even once he stole and he lied, he tried to get around the law because he knew he was not above it. So he resigned to avoid Senate conviction probe. And so and that's of course why he did it, because he knew that he wasn't above the law, so he tried to get around it. Um, and then opposition parties, that's why the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they balance each other very well, because if one party were to get too powerful, then they may deny truth to be able to achieve their own means, because they have the opportunity to do so, because let's say one gets a sweep over the other. Um, and even Trump, at his most dangerous, which, some argue is now, some argue was a couple years ago, he tried his very best to weaken the law because he knew he had no chance to get above it. He tried to manipulate it, and warp the system and get rid of people's freedom by not allowing people to criticize him, weakening the press, like making the press seem stupid by instituting the term fake news, and and to make people not want to criticize him, and try to put him, like, develop a certain amount of cult of personality around him to weaken and manipulate truth. But he but he knew that he could not that he was not above it, and that's why with January 6th, and the election deniers, he is trying to weaken the truth, manipulate it, because he knows he's not above it. If he was above it, he would say, I am the president of the United States. What do you mean? And then everyone would agree. If he was above the law, then someone would have struck down the January 6th probe months ago. But because it's still there, it shows that he's still above it. But he's trying to weaken it and slash at it, as best as he can. It's almost like a 5-year-old trying to scratch you. It's not going to kill you. You're just going to keep moving along, but it is annoying. And we'll see how much that scratching and kicking and pulling, and hugging at their leg is going to prevent them from getting things done, but he knows he's not above it. Then the law enables free press and media to criticize governments, and that's interesting thing about Trump. And the Constitution allows for changes, um, as we'd already mentioned. But in a liberal society, ideally, people want to defend their freedom, especially if subversion comes from abroad. You know, they're always looking at people on the inside, their governments, because Americans are very skeptical of their leaders, rightfully so, because they don't want to rely on them too much so that they could manipulate their own power, because they have so much power. But they also really care about any sort of subversion from abroad. The people, in a case of an existential threat like an invasion, like a defensive war against an aggressive enemy, the people in such a society, in a liberal democratic society, being attacked by a hostile power, would want to defend that state in case of an invasion. And they will ideally be loyal and not scared of you. That's why, in comparison with China, like America and other systems that are similar to it, liberal democracies, is that um, And that's because during peacetime, America pushes the idea of creating a more perfect union, not a utopia society that is already perfect and therefore you can't change it because it's already perfect, and you can never have anything better than it. That's what a system like China tries to push forward, you know, which links up quite a bit over to what we were talking about with religion. Is it America because it's not atheist like China, but it allows for a certain amount of religious tolerance, and religion is not part of the decisions made in government. Um, they advocate for a more perfect union so that people they can unite amongst each other, but in such a way that everyone feels connected no matter their differences. In
Yeah,
China, differences are not allowed, but um, but that's because that they're of the idea that you're already living the perfect life, so you can't go against it.
yeah. Going back to the point that we made in our last episode, with the removal of religion from society, the government in an atheist, in a socialist, a communistic society, they can promote themselves to essentially be the only God that citizens should follow, should have faith in, should believe in. I mean, when you have no God and only a government who hopefully provides you, protects you, gives you services, this, that, and the other, essentially that's the only God for you. It's the only God in the sky. And so authoritarians can use that as a way to bring upon within the citizens the idea that life is already perfect in these communist, socialist, and essentially atheist societies. Everything that the government does, it gives you this peace, it gives you the freedom to do a couple little things, but you have your life, you have your home, you have your tax breaks, maybe you have your unemployment benefits, this, that, and the other. You have that. You don't have to worry about, fighting for your different values and stuff, because what they want you to think is that you already have it. Um, going again, pointing back to religion, one of the things by removing religion is you remove the idea of a hope in, a greater life beyond the one you're already living. With Christianity, with basically any religion, you have the idea that once you die, you'll go to heaven. If there's no religion, there's no hope that after you die you will go to heaven. You'll have this better salvation as long as you're a good person. There's no hope. There's nothing once you die. All there is essentially now is the life that you have, the life you have under the state, which essentially is your God. Um, in these societies, once again, it kind of assumes that the current living position, like conditions, that you have are paradise. You got your house, you got your car, you got your family. What else is there? There's no paradise. There is no heaven. There is no hell even. All you have is this right here, and essentially that's the best you got. So it would bring upon you the idea of that. Why should you revolt? Why should you protest? Why should you ask for more and more if you already have it? You have everything in your society. That's what the government in these kind of communist, socialist, or basically atheist societies wants to bring upon you. They want you to believe that you have everything. There's not anything else you need to know. There's First of all, there's usually not a lot of press showing, the benefits or the things going on in the outside world. You already have essentially what's the best in the world. Why do I need to do anything else? Why do I need to, like I said, revolt against the government? It's the best one we got. Probably it's the best one on the earth for, all I know. So there's no hope and there's no drive to make your society better, because for all that the government wants to present to you, you're already living in a perfect utopia in which everything is just, great.
And this is why the Marxist idea is easily manipulated by authoritarians. Because if you believe that everything is already perfect, then that's just simply a belief. That is a belief that you can force amongst the population, yeah, and give them, their bread and circus. to give them the things that they need, that they feel that they need to be able to feel comfortable, you know, while doing whatever you want to take away their freedoms and to develop, the sort of social harmony that the CCP is so focused on. It can be easily manipulated, because you give them what they want, make it feel like it's a paradise, you know, and then justify revolt as being a sin, almost as if the government is God, and to revolt would be like a sin against God.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at these societies once again, there's no reason for you to vote to revolt first of all, because for all you know, you have the best in reality. Um, but if you do, like we said, there is no God, but what you have is the government, which again provides for you, gives you all this stuff. So revolting or even thinking of anything that's better than your government, anything that you might want to change about it, that's a sin. That's something terrible. And that's something that the government would seek to change in you, if not by force, then by coercion or changing the mindset that you even need to change anything at all. Because essentially, you're already living in Utopia. There's nothing else to really complain about.
So
Um,
technically, right, like those sort of societies, they 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 really do force you, even though it may look like they're not, to follow their party line, to follow what they want you to think. Um, and so they can't really be seen as the people want to be part of it because we have no idea what they actually think. They're being coerced into the government saying what they want. They give all the people the things that they feel that they need, like the ability to go buy things, or social services, you know, um, even if they're actually, as you might find out, rather limited in China, and increase the quality of life to where they just don't feel that they have many problems, you know, but then, you know, put forth the greatest possible punishment for anybody that says that that is not the ideal perfect life, anybody that might want to make it better or change it. And that's why liberal democracies got good bones. And that's why they survive. That's why they're internally strong and therefore they're externally strong because the people want to be part of it. And you can actually get a very accurate depiction of what the people want because people can say all sorts of crazy things being interviewed um, by foreign reporters. The people, from some foreign country might have been, could have even been the USSR, back in the last century, or even China today. Um, they may pick their audience, and find people that they want to speak to. Um, and they'll find opinions amongst people that may be against a certain policy or against a certain part of the government. But that's kind of exactly the point. If you were a geopolitical rival of the United States, namely China, and you were to go to America and interview an American over what they thought about America, um, the fact that people would be able to say that the government is terrible or that the U.S. is a hegemonic imperial power, and that not only do they hate a certain senator, they hate the whole system, and it needs to be torn down. That is a proof, an example, of the America's vitality.
yeah,
Even though it allows for people to be like that. That the government won't go after that person that said that to maybe some Chinese state propaganda piece, and stop it from being shown on Chinese TV. Not how China would if an American news network were to interview a Chinese citizen. The CCP would be really on that. The American government, for example, isn't like that. And just as equally as much, the fact that you have to pick your crowd to get a certain view of people, like if you were a geopolitical rival of the United States and you wanted, to find someone in America that agreed with you that America is a terrible government, then you would have to um, um, then you could get a difference of opinion, and that's why you wouldn't just pick some random person. You would have to I don't know, Chad. Do you get my point? I'm
Yeah,
trying to move on,
it's
but
it feels paradoxical in thinking that the strongest society is one that allows you to hate it. In in a communist society, just like we described, if you're living in a utopia, you're complacent. There's nothing to change. Everything's great. Why would you even fight to have a faster train system or cheaper groceries? It's already perfect. It's great. Fine. We're fantastic. But in America, we have the ability to hate our country. And what feels weird, but that's what makes us strong because we have the ability to criticize, we have the ability to hate on whatever we want, and then we have the ability to change it. If we don't have this complacency, if we don't believe that everything is perfect, we're going to want to make it better. We're going to want to make it ours. We want to continue the social contract in which we give some to the government as long as they give something back to us. We want to be part of that because we have the freedom to believe so. And we have the ability to hate on the government. We have the ability to hate on America. And so we want to change it. And that's so much different because we're not complacent in it. We could hate it and therefore we're going to want to change it.
and that's exactly I thought about in a connection, an American um comparison to Tiananmen Square. And the funny thing is that it's actually not too great of a comparison in the government response, which kind of says volumes. So here's the example: the March on Washington.
Mm.
Like King literally spoke at the Capitol, was it?
It
Yeah,
was
he
on
spoke.
the Lincoln
Lincoln
Memorial.
Memorial, right.
Yeah.
So like, anyway, he went to the capital city the same way in how hundreds of thousands of protesters in Beijing, occupied Tiananmen Square. They went to the capital of the country, and went to a significant historical monument, mere mile or two from where government is going through its regular functions, and hundreds of thousands of people listened to King speak and marched with him to Washington on the way. Now, it would be inaccurate to say that there weren't many in government that were worried about this, but they didn't have the same heavy hand that the CCP did when the people advocated for change in Beijing in '89. That's why it really shows you just how strong America is. America isn't insecure about its problems. Like hundreds of thousands of people in separate different cities at the same time could be protesting for this against the same thing in America,
Yeah.
and the government does not feel that they're at existential threat. In Beijing, they totally would.
Yeah. To be um in denial about your problems is essentially weak because you think that they don't exist. You're not going to change anything about them. I feel that it's strong to acknowledge your faults and to therefore try to make changes to them. That's the difference that we have between, say, China and the United States. China will never say that it's wrong, never say that there's something that needs to be fixed about them. The United States will say that we're screwed up, we're terrible, we're on a downward track, we're going to be the worst country, this, that, and the other. We could acknowledge that. We could say we have problems because we do, but we don't hide that. We let everyone know about it. And
Like,
because of that, I feel that we're really strong because we
you
acknowledge
think
that we have problems.
exactly, like the way in how the Republicans talk about Joe Biden and the way in how Democrats, just completely revoked the idea of Biden running again in 2024, you could never hear that in China. Like it's seen as an almost inevitability in the Politburo and amongst the Chinese public that Xi Jinping is going to get reelected, even though he's near 70 years old. Like that has no impact whatsoever, on the decision making in the country. Like people don't talk about Xi Jinping in China the way that people talk about Joe Biden or even Donald Trump for good reason. And regardless of the fact that, during the time of Xi Jinping and his leadership over China, the people have actually suffered quite a bit. You know, they might have had like a little bit of a benefit, you know, in their economy, you know, because China's just having their boom in their economy that's been lasting for a few decades at this point, since it opened up, you know. But Xi Jinping has really hurt the Chinese people in a lot of ways, and I urge you to look it up. You know, a lot of my a lot of my sources on the issue, you know, they come from big news sites like Reuters and The Guardian and The Atlantic or New York Times, you know, CNN, you know, MSNBC, you know, but mainly those first few sources, as well as YouTube series by people who have lived in China that may originally have had a Western background. Like there's one in particular that I like, and Lao Y 86 LAOWHY
We'll put
86.
them in the
Go look,
description.
yeah, go look him up because he has an interesting perspective. He's from Middle America, but in his mid 20s, you know, he and a couple of his friends, you know, went to live in China, ideally permanently back in like 08, 09, near 2010. And they were forced to leave near the end of the last decade in 2018, 2019, because of national security laws that were coming in place of Xi Jinping considering foreigners to be an existential threat to the Chinese state. You know, and it was during his time in China that he got to see just the reality of China, you know, things that you don't hear about from the way that they talk about themselves abroad, you know, to other countries. But then also just how dangerous of a force Xi Jinping is, particularly as an individual to China, into world peace globally. But yeah, yeah, I urge you to go look at those sources, but yeah, exactly. I mean, just linking back over to America, that's part of the reason why the US is the most powerful nation on earth. It's a robust system, you know, that balances freedom and peace and is backed up by an incredibly strong system outside. And, you know, with their military and with their political establishment, you know, that they have on the inside that is very strong, as we'd already talked about. But their political alliances that they have abroad, you know, a certain brotherhood amongst amongst democratic nations that we're going to go into later. Um, but yeah, yeah, Chad, there's a quote that you wanted to read out.
Absolutely. I have one. We have one that kind of goes back to the point on why nation will be strong externally because it is strong internally. And so, with that, we have a quote by Demaritus in a dialogue with Xerxes. And in this one, it's kind of talking about an outsider's perspective looking in to why Greece, why this nation, why it's looking so strong when these people are not following a king. They're not following, a force that's just fearing them, that's just scaring them and just supporting them. Why are they fighting so fiercely? And so with that, I believe it's from once again on politics. So we just love to quote. Um, and so I'm just going to start reading it off from there. Quote: Surely, he said to Demaritus, the Greeks will not fight against such odds. Uh, he was displeased when Demaritus assured him that they certainly would. Quote: How is it possible that 1,000 men, or 10,000, or 50,000, under a single master, but all perfectly free to do as they pleased? He could understand that they might feign courage if they were whooped into battle as his Persian troops would be, but it was absurd to suppose that they would fight against such odds. Not a bit of it, said Demaritus. They would fight and die to preserve their freedom, he added. They are free, yes, but they are not wholly free, for they have a master, and that master is law, which they fear much more than your subjects fear you. Whatever this master commands they do, and his command never to remain in formation and to conquer or die. They were citizens, not subjects, and free men, not slaves. They were disciplined, but self-disciplined. Free men are not whipped into battle. End quote. And so here's one that once again goes back to our idea of why a nation like the United States is so externally strong, and that's because internally we are strong in the freedom that we have to do what we want, to support who we want, to practice religion, to have as much kids, to make financial decisions, because we have a freedom and we serve, in this case, we serve under the law, not exactly some king or some dictator or a totalitarian who seeks to just remind us that he is sovereign, because we serve under the law and not exactly some fear-mongering government. We have the freedom of which we're guaranteed, and therefore freedom of which we will fight tooth and nail for. We will fight under odds which we will probably certainly die, as he described in this quote. We will fight for that freedom, because when we have that, that's not something we're going to lose. When we have the freedom to do and practice whatever religion we have, we're not going to take it so lightly when someone takes that away. The people who are free are going to fight extremely fiercely for whatever land, whatever government that gave them that freedom in the first place. And that's something much, much more different than you'd have in totalitarian, authoritarian societies in which there isn't that freedom and just the government who just seeks to um, if not hold back your freedom, then just to remind you that the only reason you should fight for them is because they are your leader. Certainly, you have more to say about that.
Unsurprisingly, with the name Xerxes, in his dialogue with Demaritus, who is an exiled Spartan king, um, who defected to the Persians. Um, when talking about the Greco-Persian War, which this quote is centered around, um, we often think, I think about the Battle of Thermopylae, about the brave 300 of King Leonidas against the formidable Persian force. Now, in all honesty, the myth of the 300 is indeed a myth. The defenders of Thermopylae were actually numbering near 7,000, with about 1,000 Spartans and other different allied troops of other different Greek city states.
Dang,
But
you're
they
telling
were
me the
fighting.
movie lied to us?
I know, right? But they defended against 150 to close to 200,000 men for 3 days at the Hot Gates, as so famously. The Persians actually only won, as you might remember from the story, by using a hidden mountain pass in which they could outmaneuver the Greeks and to hit them from behind and then to trap them and eventually annihilate them in battle. But it was a a very ballsy, dangerous feat of which the politicians in Sparta and Athens, um, in which they kind of knew that they were going to lose. Now, as the story goes, and actually as is quite historically accurate, King Leonidas knew he was going to die. He knew that it was a bit of a suicide mission. But as people have analyzed it over the past couple thousand years, is that um, the the defenders of Thermopylae fought so hard and for so long, and were only able to be defeated in the way they were with the Spartans just going around them using a hidden route, you know, um, that if the Persians had not found that hidden route, they probably would have held out long enough to be able to lead Xerxes to eventually just turn back around. That's actually what modern day historians and modern military analysts would analyze about the situation is that they fought so hard, outnumbered over 20 to 1, you know, that for 3 days, that that they might have actually made their enemy retreat. Now, if this were to have happened, it would have been probably the most um, the most shocking victory in military history ever. But this all happened because the Greeks, they were defending their freedom. Every single one of the men defending at the Hot Gates in Thermopylae were defending their freedom because they were free. Maybe not the slaves that maybe some of the Spartan soldiers may have had back home, but The people, the men that were fighting at the hot gates were free, and they wanted to stay free. So they knew what they had under their society, and they were content with it. They loved the democracy that they were able to have in many of the city states that they were under control of, that they lived within. But they weren't sure, what the Persians would bring, or if they knew anything about the Persians would bring, they they knew that it was going to be much less favorable than what it than the freedom that they currently had. And that's and like with the defense of Thermopylae, the heroic defense of that. I think the best comparison to that ever since then, that might even be as famous 2,000 years from now, is the fight between the brave Ukrainian people and the despotic leader of Vladimir Putin of Russia. Um, you fight best when you're free, not being forced. You free men are not whipped in the battle, as was quoted by Alan Ryan. They fight their very best when they know that the freedom that they love so much is about to be taken away from them. The
Exactly.
Russians, right? Like the Russians, they operate by a different mode of war. They are free to commit human rights atrocities, but in the Ukrainian army, there are rules of engagement. And so that's a big link over to the part of the quote that says their master is law, hinting that liberal societies, whether it be the Greeks of the past era or now, liberal societies now, they their master is law, and nothing is above the law. They will defend themselves, but they will not be brutal. Russians will kill Ukrainian people, but Ukrainians will not willingly kill Russian people. They will defend their territory, and anger may get the best of them in a fight against Russian soldiers. But they have certain rules of engagement, and if a Russian soldier were to surrender, they will accept them and treat them with the full hospitality of modern war.
Exactly. If they surrender, they'll get exactly the hospitality. They won't get castrated. That's a real thing. This happened recently. You could go look that up. Don't watch the video. It's terrible. But it's happened. Their master is law. As the quote describes, in a liberal system, people are not governed by simply just their president or their prime minister or their supreme leader or their anything like that. At the end of the day, the supreme power is law. No one is above that law. Not the president, not the senators, not their local election leaders. Law. People operate under the different standard because of that, and because they have that law to give them, order in society, which once again, that's one of the things that you get with the liberal system. You have that order, but you also have that freedom. Freedom is what people are fighting for. Freedom is what the Spartans fought for, and freedom is what the Ukrainians are fighting for now. It is interesting to compare, the Battle of Thermopylae to the Battle of Ukraine, essentially, because you have similar stakes at hand. You have a smaller force fighting to defend itself, fighting for democracy against a much larger power. You just go look at Russia on a map, you can see it behind me, compared to the much smaller state of Ukraine, fighting against more troops, more tanks, more artillery, more planes, more technology, um, and fighting against a force which used to be one widely regarded as one of the most powerful states on the planet, and it still is with their nuclear forces conventionally kind of up for grabs. But they're fighting against a force that has much, much more than they do in a fight that it could very easy they could very it's not out of the realm of possibility that they can lose against Russia. Ukraine can. But once again, the reason that they could fight, the reason they fight so fiercely, the reason that they fight so hard and have fought for, what is it, 5, 6 months now, is because they are fighting for their freedom, because they're fighting for their democracy. They are fighting for the personal ideals that they have had and held for so long and are now at threat that are not at threat of being taken away. That's what makes people fight. That's what makes people fight hard. That is why when a state internally is strong, because of the freedom that it gives its citizens, and is therefore supported by its citizens externally, it could be much, much more than just how many tanks or how many people or how many guns that state has. It is the will to fight, the courage, the bravery that this freedom will inspire that can make a state last much longer than what a statistic on a piece of paper can tell you. That freedom is what makes people fight.
Napoleon is once quoted as saying, and if you've watched enough CNN, you've heard enough from the military analysts, and you probably heard this a great number of times. I know I have. Napoleon is once quoted as saying, "The moral is to the material as three is to one," and you really see that with the Battle of Thermopylae and very consequential battles in Ukraine, whether it be the Battle of Kiev, find like they're just pushing back the Russians. The Russians will say it was a withdrawal, but no, they were pushed out. You know, after a month of fighting in a battle that the U.S. intelligence, the same intelligence that was right in saying that the Russians would invade, they were incorrect in saying that battle for Kiev would be lost in 48 to 72 hours. So um, what was regarded as being the hard to deny truth that Russia was going to invade and then did, you know, the same source that was true was also believed to be on the side of truth once Russian troops were within 10, 20 kilometers of the capital on the first day or two, eventually were proven to be wrong after a month of fighting, finally pushing them out of the territory. But anyway, whether it be like the Battle of Severodonetsk or the Battle of Mariupol, or the current counteroffensives in Kherson and Izium right now, as well as Kharkiv. The Ukrainians have a certain amount of legitimacy that the Russians don't have. They know they're on the side of the truth because they don't want to conquer Russia. Once they eventually push the Russians out of their land, regardless of what Putin and RT state propaganda said before, they only want to defend themselves. They don't want to conquer Russia. Once they defend themselves, and let's say they push the Russians back from the Kharkiv city, which is only 20, 30 miles from the Russian border, and let's say they make it to the Russian border, they don't actually plan on moving into Russia. They just want to be able to defend their land, as I said. So they're on the side of truth, and there's not much of an argument about that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of close it out, they are fighting for their freedom to have a country and have its borders secure, their freedom to make the decisions as a nation as they so please, and their freedom to do and act and move however they want to without the threat of being bombed, shelled, blown up by cluster munitions, or shot in the street by invading soldiers. They are fighting on the side of freedom. And so with that, we're going to basically end out this episode. And in our next one, we're going to continue on this idea of why liberal democracy is so strong because of that freedom. Why freedom fighters may never fail because they believe in that freedom, that idea that they could do and act as they so please. And so with that, we're the Marshals of the Truth. We'll see you in the next episode.